You fools. What a bunch of fools. How's that if you want to win friends and influence people? Paul, trying to convince a bunch of people of the error of their ways, starts out that way in this chapter. You foolish Galatians. Who bewitched you? Not bad getting close to Halloween, right? Good text. Who bewitched you? Paul knows who bewitched them. He just doesn't understand how the players tricked them into departing the way that he had taught, the way of grace, and began moving toward the way of law. And so he's asking questions in the first part, these 5 verses, he's asking questions of them. Was Christ not crucified before you? That is the ultimate gift from God, the sign of love for all people. Did you miss that somewhere? Paul wants to know. The Spirit came to you. And what Paul wants them to get clear on is this. He's raising these questions. Did you do good and then experience the Spirit of God? Or did you see God's love and grace and receive it, and then in receiving it were you blessed by the Spirit? Sometimes it's hard for us to get stuff in our heads. We are a people, even though the old Protestant work ethic may be fading into the background in many family systems along the way, it is still hard for us to get a grip for what it takes to be in a loving relationship. When I first met Chris, I can say this, see, she's not here. She's not going to hear any of this, and you're not going to tell her. When I first met Chris, of course there was chemistry. There's always chemistry in those situations. But when I first met her and I wanted a relationship, I worked hard. I went to more antique stores than I ever would. And sometimes on Saturday afternoon during football games, I was in antique stores looking at stuff I never wanted to see in my life. But she liked going to antique stores. And I wanted to be with her. And so I was willing to go. You remember the story that she wouldn't marry me until I ate Chinese food because I hate Chinese food? And so what did I do when I wanted to stick the proposal deal? I took her out for Chinese food. I worked hard. We were down in Lewis, Delaware, about, maybe 45 miles or so south of Dover. And we were in, an antique store just before Christmas, and she saw a necklace. I wish I could remember the name of it because y'all would recognize the name of it. I don't keep up with that stuff. But she loved that necklace. And I'm looking, oh, wow. I mean, that's a bite out of my old pocketbook. But she really likes that necklace. And so we drove back to Dover. And the first thing the next morning, I called these people who happened to be one of the few stores in the antique business open on Mondays. No, it was on a Saturday, and I called them on Monday, and they were open. And I said, you still got it? And I described the necklace. Yes, we've got it. Well, I know you probably can't just do this on the phone, but I'm coming. So please, set that necklace aside. Just give me 2 hours, and I'll be there. And so I drove south down there to get that necklace. And I got that necklace, and I looked at it, and I'm thinking, oh, well, that's nice, but well, never mind what else I was thinking. And so I drove back home because, why? I wanted to do something, okay, that would make her happy. After we had lost a pregnancy, and things were pretty hard. And she was hurting so badly. I began doing other kinds of stuff, silly stuff, but I wanted her to not only get the silliness, but the love connected with the silliness. And so I'd read somewhere in this romantic book, and so I went to her bathroom and I would roll these little hearts and stuff up in the toilet paper. So when she went, that she would get... Sounded like a good idea at the time. She received it well, I guess. You get the message. It was work. But here's the thing. As you journey together, when you're with that person that you feel so strongly you want to be with, and they feel the same way, time goes by and Chris doesn't get as many flowers as she used to, though she still gets some flowers. And it's not because I love her less or take her for granted. It is just that you realize that the essence of relationship isn't built upon what you do for each other. It isn't built upon earning the love. It is the love. And even in the hard places, even in the frustrating places, even in the most aggravating places, love is the essence of what it's about. Paul needs for the people in Galatians to get that they're journeying with a God who gave in Christ this gift of grace and love, and they no longer have to go around proving themselves in some specific kind of way to this God, because God has already received them as children. There's a power in knowing that you're in a relationship. There's a power in knowing that you are graced. And Paul then wants to know, when we get into like verse 3, what happened to the maturation? Why did you not grow into seeing this? Why did things not deepen for you? Paul said, you started well. You received the Spirit of Christ. And then you turned to the works of flesh. Now, we talked last Sunday that, that mark was best seen and best known amongst the male population, the circumcision, going back to the Mosaic covenant. But these people in Galatia had been told by the Judaizers that they need to follow Jewish law in order to be justified before God. So, I wanted to take 1 second, because back when we first started our O&A small groups, not small groups, our educational events, Gail and or Clay, I'm not sure which one ran these off for us, they provided us this list, and it caught my eye on my desk this week. 76 things banned in Leviticus. Okay? Leviticus, part of the Pentateuch. The Levites, the priestly tribe. So let's just kind of lift some of those up in case you want to follow the law in order to make God look kindly upon you. You're banned, for instance, from burning any yeast or honey in offerings to God. I'm sure you did that this morning before you got here. I'm not holding against you. Failing to include salt in offerings to God. Eating fat. I'm sure God ignored my breakfast. Eating blood, for those of you who like your steak rare. failing to testify against any wrongdoing you've witnessed, or failing to testify against any wrongdoing you've been told about. Touching an unclean animal. Okay, let's move on down the list. They're just so abundant. Then there's lots of people you shouldn't have sex with, but we'll kind of go past that. Making idols or metal gods. Picking up grapes that have fallen in your vineyard. Stealing or lying. Yeah, you can't do that. It's defrauding your neighbor. Holding back the wages of an employee overnight. Got to pay them that day off. Doing anything to endanger a neighbor's life. Planting different seeds in the same field. Well, there goes our community garden, Bob. Trimming your beard. I haven't done mine lately. I knew this was coming. You see, turning to mediums or spiritualists. It goes on, and I'm sure you want to know all 76. I'll just hold this, and you can check with me this week to see if you're justified before God. We have to worry about that. Cursing your father or mother. That's punishable by death. You get the deal. Now, by the time we get to first century, what had happened is because for so long the Jewish population had lived in exile and had been conquered by just about everybody coming and going. There had been a loosening, if you will, of the law, but the law was still a pretty heavy burden. What Paul is asking the Galatians is, do you really want to live this way? Do you really want this burden upon you to say, look, God, there's 76 things I haven't done, plus all the other stuff that's written throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. The burden of the law was just so incredible to keep, and no one actually kept it, even the priest and the most righteous. They pretended to, but it really was unimaginable to keep all of the cultic laws. Paul wants to know what happened to the maturation process. You started so well. I believed in you. You heard the gospel of grace, and now you've taken off in some other direction. And then he gets off on the miracles of the Spirit. Paul's asking the Galatians if they're working out their salvation, and if they have, has that really come to anything? Their lives were already changed by the gift of the Spirit. And having had a radical transformation, what in the world were they doing, ignoring the miracles of the Spirit in transforming human life? What in the world made you believe that you could gain the Spirit in this way? Works, you see, are always, and I don't want to specifically get on any religious system, because then we have to get on ours. But you understand that rules are never really about faith. That those people who live in the world and define their faith as being rules keepers, by rules keeping, they're not after faith. They're not living in faith. They're after certainty and control. And if you're after certainty and control, you've missed the point along the way. Throughout the ages, there have been religious systems built upon religious systems, all based on the calculated formula of how much do we have to do in order to be righteous in this particular system. We like that, even when we don't do it well. We like it because we can determine in our own minds what is righteous, what rules we have to keep, and then we have control. And when we have control, it means that we have dismissed the possibility that God has control in us, through us, and around us. This is what Paul knows. The Spirit blows, and the Spirit is the Spirit of grace. And if we live by grace and receive God's goodness and live in the depth of relationship, then we're out of control. And that's quite wonderful, because it means that we put those glasses of love on, and it changes everything. When I put my glasses of love on and give up control, it means I could love to the end of time my first mother-in-law. Hey, that's not an easy thing to do, trust me. She had more rules for me than you can ever imagine. But living by grace, because it's never by will or what we want, it's always about grace, is what Paul is preaching over and over again. Because when we read Paul and we say, well, you know, the preacher needs to get off on something else. And I want to say, when I get it, and I think you get it, we'll move on to something else. It is a marvelous thing. Amazing thing that God says, in Christ, enough. In Christ, enough. I wish people on Facebook could grasp that sometime, who seem to spend forever drawing rules for other people. And I say this morning knowing my soul's being prayed for in the mountains of North Carolina, because my cousin saw me dancing, number one, on Facebook. And secondly, dancing in church. My only sense of relief is that Mary's in trouble with me. Open ourselves, brothers and sisters, open ourselves to this mystery of the crucified Christ as a symbol of God's love, saying, I will love you forever.